Right now, you go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Oh, the op-ed. The Woodward book. Kavanaugh. Crazy in the White House. The hunt, the witch hunt begins for the demon, for the anonymous author. And look, I was joking when I said it was Mike Pence. Got a bunch of emails from people going, couldn't have been Mike Pence. He's a good, God-fearing Christian who wouldn't lie. I'm sorry. For the person who wrote that, I'm not responding. I respond to every email, everyone, every half-baked, every ridiculous comment. I do respond. Not to that one. I'm just not. I'm just not doing it. I'm just not going to allow myself to have to do that. It is not going to happen. I'm sorry. It's just not. Because you got to think of a better. You've got to think of something a little bit better to get under my skin with, because that ain't going to happen. Now, the fun, and this is the big fun. Is a friend of mine who's heavily into this whole gig. Her job is to watch the news and report on it, and all day every day. She's inundated in this, and she's just like, I'm crazy. I'm tired, and I've had that conversation with a bunch of people lately who are just like, I'm tired. I'm the assault. Look, Trump's assault on our sense and our sensibilities, it's working. The GOP assault method is working, because I'm hearing lots of people saying, I'm just tired. Can't we just have a day off? Can't we just not have this chaos? I mean, the USA Today had a piece today where, the headline was, "I wake up every day in a bad mood." And that's a lot of people. And for me, as I was thinking about this today, this is Wisconsin all over. And I've said this before, Wisconsin was the petri dish, was the experimenting area where all of the bad GOP ideas, all of the horrible tactics, all of the assaults, all of the messaging, the mechanisms to get it out, all of that stuff was really perfected there. And I've been saying for a while that my fear is that, as passionate as you are about saving the country, and as angry as you are about, all of the horribly destructive things that we know that Trump is doing, not to mention all of the horribly destructive things that are happening we just don't know about yet, you get fatigue. And this happened in Wisconsin. If you go back and you look at 2011 into 2012, they just hammered the people of Wisconsin. Every day, just inundated and basically blew their eardrums out, to where it was, by the time the recall election had gone through the process, people were like, just stop, just the pain, please, just stop. I just need a break. Because look, this is what they did to the people in Wisconsin, and the Republicans were masterful at it. They owned the airwaves, both radio and television. They completely papered them over with tons of mailers and people knocking on the doors and phone calls at dinner, and just a constant sensory overload assault. And I remember talking to people from Wisconsin. I had them on the show at the time, going, so what are things like on the ground? And they go, horrible. Even activists who were look, we go knock on people's doors and people are yelling at us, get away from us. Even if they agree with us 100%, they're still like, just stop. I think we're almost hitting this point. We're almost at the point to where this week was, I would argue like none other in this administration, because like I said the other day, you had McCain's funeral, which was kind of a moment where everyone just kind of went, okay, it's kind of normal to see, Clinton and Bush and Obama, speaking nice, and Lieberman and everybody, nice words about John McCain and all of that. And, there was some kind of normalcy, if you will. And then come Monday, Labor Day, where we're supposed to be resting and we're supposed to be enjoying a day of family and a day of rest for being laborers, the fire hose begins, with the Kaepernick and Nike thing and the division and people burning their shoes. And I'm like, good, burn your shoes. I'm all in favor of it. Burn your underwear and burn all that stuff. Look, it's going to be good for the economy. We need consumers. And then to Tuesday, right into the Kavanaugh thing, and of course the book from Woodward, and now the anonymous op-ed. All of this has just been like this fire hose of insanity. And it's one of those things that I've known for a while. I've kind of, I temper myself a little bit. I go, what? Sometimes I got to get away from social media. I got to take a break. I got to go do something. We went swimming a lot. We did a lot of things away from this, because you need to get away. And this is my opening in this. There are times where you need a normal life. And as I was reading this USA Today article, the guy's like, I don't have internet. I don't have any social media. I don't do any of that stuff. I don't have any email alerts or anything like that. But I wake up in a bad mood because the chaos, the insanity, and what's going to happen. And this is where my fear level, this is where my fear is. Understand, you in every election, in every political moment, you have your, I use 1 to 5. You're going to have your ones. The ultra conservatives, the ultra liberals, they're going to be your ones on either side of the equation. And conversely, if the conservatives are 1, the liberals are 5, and if the liberals are 1, the conservatives are 5. You're not moving them. My problem is what happens to the 3s. The people who are in the middle, who don't really pay an awful lot of attention because they've got lives that they're trying to live, or they just don't want to be bothered. They're the ones who decide what direction the country goes. Generally the dumbest people, generally the most uninformed, generally the most over-misinformed. They're the ones who drive our politics, because the right and the left, they're there. You're going to go pull the D, you're going to go pull the R. That's going to happen. Those are solid. It's that middle ground. And it always amazes me, the 2 weeks before an election, they go, "Oh, you're going to vote for him?" I don't know. Haven't decided yet. You go, how is that possible? How is it possible 2 weeks before election, you still haven't figured it out? because they're not paying attention. Now, the problem that I'm having is that those people are now being affected. They're being inundated. And I have a couple of these folks that I know that I kind of keep around, just, as, bounce an idea off. Hey, what do you think of this? Where's your thinking? Kind of just some light polling, if you will. And they're saying the same thing. The insanity coming out of the White House is distressing. The fact that Trump is off the deep end, and all of the chaos that we knew and that we've been talking about in this program for since November of 2016 is actually true. We're actually getting documentation. People are writing books. People are writing invisible op-eds, even though I still think it's propaganda, and the timing is always curious to me. Even that makes me wonder. But I go back to what happened in Wisconsin. Ultimately, what happened in Wisconsin is those folks in the middle, they stayed home. The folks in the middle just tuned out. They closed their ears, they closed their doors, they closed their minds. They turned away. And my fear is, because ultimately the Democrats, again, did a really stupid thing by putting up the guy that Scott Walker beat in the general election again, while people were clamoring for, change and a fighter, they brought Barrett back. But that's a whole nother debacle. But for that entire year plus, from February, when you had the 100,000, more than 100,000, and look, I was there. We were there for 9 days, sleeping on the granite floor. There were 100,000 people there demanding that their government listen to them. And what did the Republicans do? Like thieves in the night, they rammed through Act 10. All of the people there be damned, because they knew they had a plan. And that plan was to do whatever the hell they wanted, and then just continue to do whatever the hell they wanted. And then once the recall happened, and which I thought was a dumb idea to begin with, but it is what it was. But once that happened, then they just went into full-on attack mode. And this is what we're seeing out of Trump. We're seeing full-on attack mode of every bit of our sense. And the hope is that we take the time we need, step back, and get out and vote on November 6th. That's the important thing. If you want some sanity back in our government, you've got to add some balance. And if Jack would take away Trump's Twitter account, that would be the other thing. But they took Alex Jones away, so they should. I think Trump should be next. Just my thought. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think. What you know. What do you think of the assault? How's it affecting you? I'd love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back with our good friend Scott Dworkin. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that became known as Bloody Thursday. 7 striking workers were shot dead and another 30 wounded at the Jacola Mill in Honapath, South Carolina. The Great Textile Strike of 1934 had started on September 1st. The 22-day strike spanned the eastern United States from New England to Georgia and involved close to 500,000 workers. The main issue was the dreaded stretch-out, increased workloads at the same or even reduced pay rates. Striking textile workers implemented the flying picket squad tactic employed by Minneapolis Teamsters earlier that summer. Hundreds drove from mill to prevent scabbing. Mill executives across the Piedmont were stunned and terrified at the strike's effectiveness and the workers' militancy. Strikers at the Chicola Mill had formed solid picket lines at the gate when scabs and special deputies armed by the mill owners opened fire. All 7 were shot in the back as they tried to escape the hail of bullets. According to a New York Times article the following day, the killings marked, quote, the beginning of the second bloody phase of the strike as one town after another reported completion of preparations to resist the flying squads and the picketing activity of the strikers. Frank Beecham, the grandson of Chicola Mill owner and mayor of Hona Path Dan Beecham, has worked to unearth the history of the massacre and apologize for his grandfather's cruelty. He notes that, as in many southern mill towns, after the strike went down to defeat, those who struck were fired and blacklisted. Those who retained their jobs essentially took a vow of silence, never to discuss the strike or the massacre again.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
You know, just think about this week alone. Some of the stories that have come out. The fact that Trump's State Department is refusing to provide or renew passports to U.S. citizens who have Hispanic-sounding names. That's going on. The fact that he came out and said NBC, did something that was unethical, and that he was considering doing something to remove their ability to broadcast and to operate in the U.S. And also think about the fact that he went on with that Daily Caller interview and said that it's embarrassing that people are protesting. And also that whoever the person who wrote the op-ed, that it was treason and that the New York Times should turn it over right now so we can publicly execute this person. That just this week. That's how crazy things have gotten. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, the week that has been. I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come talk with us. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
It is dark and gloomy in our offices here. And so I forgive me for the less lighting. You know, the lighting's pretty bad in here.
Well, it is dark and gloomy over the entire country right now, Scott. I mean, we've got a guy who is clearly not fit to be in office.
Obviously, it's really frustrating. But, you know, as you and I have been saying for, 2 years plus, well, ever since he entered the race, or maybe since he started his show, The Apprentice, but he's not fit to, mow my lawn, let alone shine my shoes, or even I can't think of a job that he's actually qualified for. And I'm being very serious. Like, I've spoken to a doctor, a psychologist that has explained to me that he is a legitimate sociopath, and he is malignant narcissist, and he is a danger to everybody. And I vetted him so hard. I was like, could this be an act? Could this be something that can be faked? It's like, absolutely not. And there's hundreds of us that, are assigned to this letter. We all agree, and they're across the country. And these are some of the best professionals, Harvard links, Princeton, and everywhere. And that's just psychologically. Okay. So you have the psychological element. He's obviously, he's got more issues than just that. You have the treason angle, the fact that he, during his presidency, has conspired with our biggest adversary against our own country and against our own people to attack America, on top of the fact that he helped Russia attack America in the 2016 elections, on top of the fact that he worked with Michael Cohen and is an unindicted co-conspirator in an election fraud case. The fact that he's involved in not just paying off his mistresses, but the fact that he cheated in the first place. That should be a big deal just there, and then multiple times, right after the pregnancy, like, the man's heartless. And so you have just those angles. That's something. on top of the fact that he also obstructed justice dozens of times. There are hundreds of reasons why he should be impeached. One of the constitutional lawyers who I talked to has 8 reasons why, specifically drawn out. But, you know, I'm a simple kind of guy. One tweet against the Justice Department, that's impeachable. He should be removed from office just for that. We need to hit a reset button here in America. And yes, I believe he's unfit. Sorry for the rant.
No, it's something that we need actually to be ranting about. And I saw today that Elizabeth Warren came out and said, look, whoever wrote this op-ed, whoever's inside the White House, whoever the resistors inside are, invoke the 25th Amendment. Do your job. Do your freaking job. You said you sworn to uphold the Constitution. How about it's time to do it?
It'd be hard to do that because Trump's isolating everybody now because he's so paranoid. So it's going to be hard for them to get together to figure that out. I think a resignation push is most likely at this point. I'm not sure if anything's going to happen. It's going to depend on the American people. It's going to depend on November. It really is. And if people don't show up or if they vote the other way, then then obviously we've been infiltrated by a foreign power again. Yeah, but this time I think manipulating the votes because they're outnumbered. They're completely outnumbered. They're surrounded. He was sweating like a hog yesterday, or I don't want to end up talking to his looks, but he was sweating at a constant. He was carrying around. What was funny about the op-ed, did you see him yesterday? He's holding it in his hands and parts were highlighted. And I was like, I bet, I can almost guarantee he hasn't read the whole thing. He only read the highlighted parts. And I was just like, that's
so Trump.
It's so frustrating. But yeah, I think what's the worst thing right now is everything's going to get worse. It goes down like it's something's going to happen that is catastrophic to this country, is my assumption. And it's going to be something which wakes everybody up, and I'm guessing it's a physical attack from Russia. That's the only reason you hack and do this stuff is to attack us, and I would assume they try and take Alaska from us.
Or there are still all of these terrorist groups around the world who hate us and want to do us harm, and we're at a moment much like we were during the Bush years, where nobody was minding the store, nobody was paying attention to any of this stuff. And my fear is they've hired the best people who don't know a damn thing about what's going on, and we are vulnerable, in my view.
Right, and the 25th Amendment, you can be hopeful with that. My guess is that this Mueller's going to have a multi-layered report that comes out in stages, and it'll be one report on the influence of the Russian mafia on the United States, and it will implicate Donald Trump in over $1 billion worth of money laundering for the Russians that are directly connected to Putin over the past 30 years. I think that he'll also be implicated via a second part of that same sort of report that involves him obstructing justice. And then I think there's going to be another report, and it's just going to keep on going like that. And each report's going to be another big bombshell. And so Rudy Giuliani can come up with his big bad report. But I think the music's here, and anybody who turns on him now. I even had a GOP lobbyist tell me today that Trump is he's going to perform lie detector tests on everyone, cabinet members and staff and family. And he, not only that, he wants to arrest whoever did it. And I don't understand. My guess is he has dirt on them, and he would release it and get them arrested.
Look, my view, Scott, was that he was going to go even further down the authoritarian path, public execution. I mean, because he's already said it's treason. So now saying, the New York Times should be turning over their name because of national security. I'm going, really? This is where we're going? And that's scary stuff, because I think this guy would really want to have a public firing squad.
If that's treason, what was it that he did? What was it that him and his campaign, the dozens of people who sent thousands of messages, emails, phone calls, meetings in person, you know, with dozens of representatives of the Russian government in the Kremlin. Like, you know, it's absurd, and he has no defense here, and I think he's up against the wall, and this is what a guilty person does. You know, he just said, Giuliani just told a news outlet right now.
The AP.
Yeah, he's definitely not gonna talk about parts of the Russia, and it's like, guess what, guy? You don't get to choose. You don't make the rules. You're not in charge in regards to this investigation, and you never were. You've always been the target because you did it.
Right.
Oh, why am I being targeted? Because you're a criminal. Because you broke laws, and we know it. You've done it in front of our faces, and that's why he's gotten away with it, because people assume that's not illegal. Yes, I believe that he stood there and sent signals during the campaign to Russia very clearly, and you know, it's not a coincidence. I think he assumed that he was going to get away with it, and the answer is he's not. But whether or not America will be broken in half, or, you know, as bad as it is right now, or if it's going to get worse, that's up to Congress and you know, the Republicans and obviously the American people. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary stuff. Let me get your thought on the op-ed. The timing of it's kind of curious to me. The anonymous thing. I think the New York Times, I think they were duped into putting it out when they did, because I think it sucked all the oxygen out of the room yesterday around the Kavanaugh hearing. But I'm curious your thoughts.
You know, it was interesting timing, but I would hope that the New York Times would not be fooled into something like that. It feels like this was a panicked senior staffer that has had enough, and so I don't think that. I think it's a panicked staffer that wrote it, and I think that they verified it, and they were in person, and they probably taped it or had some kind of collateral to protect them, just in case. But you know, at the same time, they don't have to release who it is ever. You know, that's how America works. And I think the reason why it was so effective was because it was anonymous. And I also think if you learn from the pageantry of Trump PR, if you learn from that, think about the difference between releasing it anonymously like this and being able to stack on top of it. Their name eventually leaks out. They confirm it, book deal, bigger than even being in the administration. You're an American hero. I wanted to start it. I wanted to get it out there. And I was working on getting out of the administration. Like, I can see that kind of vision. I do not think that it was released intentionally to distract from Kavanaugh, just because it's been so beneficial towards the Democrats in regards to the Kavanaugh hearing. And every time that we can chip away at the legitimacy of the president, it chips away at the nomination process and the fact that he's even up there. I mean, my thoughts on the Kavanaugh nomination overall is the fact that he should be removed from the bench that he's on right now. He shouldn't be a judge anymore. He's committed perjury. He obviously is a partisan person that has no stances that a real judge should have. He is, if Trump and Hannity had a baby, you know, that's who it will be, on steroids, because he's scary, because he looks normal and he looks, you know, legit, and he's supposed to be this stable guy. Yeah,
he's supposed to be a good guy. You're right. I mean, he's a good guy. But did you see the look that he gave to that father who went up to shake his hand? And he turned at him and he gave him this kind of, you know, you're dead to me kind of look, which is really just bizarre to me.
Yeah, I think you know, it was a weird interaction. I think he thought he knew who it was at first, and then he turned around and saw him, and he's like, "Oh crap!" And then he just zips away. They said security. That guy didn't look like a security guard, by the way. He had a BlackBerry or like a Bluetooth kind of thing in his head, not a security coil, from what I saw. So, you know, anyway, I think that was disgusting. I think he knew who he was, and I think he was like, the last thing I can do is shake his hand when the NRA is spending millions of dollars on me to get me into the Supreme Court. So I think he knew exactly who it was, because if he shook his hand, then what's the response? You know, then it's like, oh well, he spoke to him, and even then he still has the you know, the thought that babies should be armed with machine guns at their nurseries. You know what I mean? Like, this is the kind of guy that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a lunatic. And I mean, like, it's very clear for me, a racist lunatic that has no judgment, no good judgment. And he also, obviously, it looks like, conspired with Trump's attorneys and also his staff, because he did admit that. And that was a very short part of it today, where he admitted, he's like, well, we do moot court stuff with White House staff. And I was like, wait a second.
What was that? Oops.
Testing out questions about Mueller and how you would respond, and they teach you how to filibuster and give no question whatsoever. You know, so my hope is that, again, some of these things become real and they present this evidence. But I will stay at the belief, as the op-ed things are obviously true. You know, I think that if when he's removed from office or decides to resign, if he's been a criminal this entire time, then we should do everything that we need to remove every single person he appointed to any position whatsoever, and then also prevent ourselves from having this happen again. I think the time of lifetime appointments is over.
Do you think it's that bad that you go back and you take Gorsuch out, you go back, you take all these federal judges that they've been appointing left and right that we're not really even hearing about? Do you think it is that bad that we should be going back and just pulling all those back?
Yes, every single one. You cheated, you lied. This is America. Everybody loves a comeback, and you know, when you cheat and when you lie, you don't get away with it. We catch you, and then we restore the faith of the American people by, you know, replacing them with people that the American people support. A lot of these people probably will, you know, stay there, but we're going to have to do our best to pull out the disease, because anyone that Trump touched is obviously corrupt in some form, or, you know, maybe they're not. But do you want to have to ask that question? Do you want to have to wonder? And so I don't want to have to know about that. So yeah, it'll be hard, but that's one of the things that, you know, when people talk about it's going to take a long time for us to rebuild, one of the things is taking all those people and being like, all right, you're gone. And maybe you have to work on it one by one, but you got to do it, because they shouldn't have been there in the first place. And criminals shouldn't choose who our judges are. You know what I mean? Like, that's insane. That's the definition of insanity, you know?
I'm right there with you. No, I mean, and I truly believe that was the quid pro quo. I believe that Trump asked him for his loyalty, and I think Kavanaugh gave it. But, you know, and again, that may sound conspiratorial, but I just fear we're that deep into the muck at the bottom of the barrel.
He met with Trump, and that's, you know, just the fact that he met with Trump, and I believe it was one-on-one. He's going to ask for his loyalty, but he's not going to use that word because he assumes he has a bug or something weird. So he's sitting there, and I would assume that he's like, so, like, you know, like, what do you think about these things happening right now? Like, you know, very broad terms or something. But I see the same guy. There's no way that maybe he presented himself in a lighter way than he did with Comey. You know, maybe he's learned from that and talked, you know, with his lawyers about how he could talk with them in a more legal way. And I just would assume that, you know, there's no way in the world that if he's working with their attorneys, that he wasn't talking about the Russia probe, and that this is not a political position.
Right.
It's not. So, like, if he's talking about the Russia probe, it's a criminal investigation into the guy that appointed him. So,
yeah,
like,
do you think that, you know, I
wants to appoint him? Sorry.
Yeah, I was watching the Leahy, talking to Kavanaugh, and asked about, can the president? He said he can pardon himself. Can he? And can he pardon people who were witnesses against him? And Kavanaugh tried to play dodgeball and say, well, it's hypothetical, something I've never really thought about. And immediately my mind goes, you were George W. Bush's right-hand man. Yes. You were somebody who, for the Bush years, we were saying was a war criminal who should be impeached and locked up. You never thought of that, never came up, being Bush's right-hand man, never once? Because I don't buy it.
And stop talking about 9/11 like you're Rudy Giuliani or if you're in the towers. It's very offensive. It's disgusting because they keep on talking about, oh, yeah, you were in the White House. I mean, there were other people in the White House there. It didn't get hit. Like, there were a lot of worse places to be. But, like, as an American, we don't need to relive that fact and after that, and don't use it for the reason why, you know, you're going to torture people. You know what I mean? Don't use it to justify why you think a president shouldn't be impeded from doing his job if he committed crimes. You know, don't use it. And they're using that. Then they're using these children, right, as political props. There's no other reason for them to be in that building, not whatsoever. This is an adult conversation more so than anything. Is my feeling. It's America, yes, but this is a different time. And with the disgusting Trump, now I think viewer discretion is advised. But you know, they're using kids as a political prop. They're trying to. Did you see the questions from the Republicans? They're not questions. It's worse than Fox News.
They're
like,
setups.
Yeah, it's just, well, you did. They're totally building it for. They're leading. You know,
here's the beach ball. Here's the beach ball. Hit it with the bat. And
then Democrats, you know, need to be. Booker did a wonderful job this morning. You know, that's how they need to be. And as we need to be just as dramatic, if not more, and we need to be very explosive in regards to our arguments and make it very clear that this is not something. And we have to. The great thing about it, no matter if you think, oh, he's going to run in 2020 or whatever, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. He, in his mind, he thought he was going to, you know, risking or potential expulsion. Yeah, maybe he didn't think really. I'm not sure, but like we need people to not care if they lose their jobs.
No, I think the leadership should have leaked all this stuff. Look, if they're not going to make it available to the American public before these confirmation hearings, if there isn't a full vetting process that we can all partake in, I think it's incumbent on the Democrats. It's their duty to put this stuff out. And you know, I mean, it's ridiculous that they haven't already.
They're marked committee confidential. The only thing I see that's confidential about them is that it would make it for uncomfortable questioning, and also probably he wouldn't be able to proceed. I would assume that he would have, you know, things are in this document. They're obviously hiding them because things that they do have are this bad. What are they hiding?
Yep.
You know, like what exactly are they hiding? And also, why isn't George W. on board with, you know, releasing this stuff? So it's got to be about torture. And you're right. He was with them for, I believe, 5.5 years. He wrote speeches for him. He advised him on writing bills. He met with Congress on his behalf. He was a very senior guy there.
He saw every communications that came to Bush. He was the right-hand man. It
was Bush. He would receive the message for Bush, even speak on his behalf.
Yep, he was the gatekeeper who you didn't get into the Oval Office without him signing off on it. So he knows everything. He knows where every body's buried. He knows where every bad policy is. He knows every discussion. He knows it all, and yet we're not getting to see any of that.
And he's in on these conversations. I mean, you don't think that he was like, yeah, I'd love to be on the Supreme Court to the Federalist Society funded by the Koch brothers. Like this is the monster that we're dealing with, and this is just another reminder of why we vote and why we need to speak out and protest and call them every day, send letters, email, show up, volunteer locally, help out your community, help out your campaigns, and it all runs together because Republicans do not believe in community anymore. And so just the basic premise of like our democracy and how we stand as Americans, you know, like what we are, the moral fiber. They think it's okay to not have morals. They think it's okay to lock kids in cages and turn them into orphans overnight. You know,
this is the party of family values.
Morals is what we were really built on. I know that we had some evil past, obviously, but like the thought behind America is that we want to help the world become a better place, not just here, you know, but we want to be the best. We want to be the best and brightest country out there. It is built, the foundation of that all has always been us taking the higher road, or at least looking like it, and just being better people with the morals of helping each other out. And they do not believe in the basic premise of American ideology where you help your neighbor out. These are things in the Bible. And so I'm not sure what they actually stand for. That's absolutely horrifying. There's nothing I think that's more terrible than not knowing where people stand, except for I just don't know why you're even there. What are you doing? You know what I mean? I just know, if I don't care who's sitting in front of me, there's a Supreme Court nominee and there's all this crap sitting in front of me, I'm gonna rip them into shreds because they're supposed to be on the Supreme Court. So again, leading back to your original question, I think that the op-ed could have been timed in that way, but I'm just not sure if that could have been intentional. I think there could have been better timing for the New York Times to release it. I think that's for sure. But at the same time, we're at threat level midnight, as it would be said in The Office. But they're starting to eat their own, and they're starting to separate, and there's cracks, and they're obvious. The polling is down, and they're, right now they probably lose 40 House seats, and that, is a disaster for them. And that triggers, all I would say is, we're not going to talk about impeachment until Dems would potentially take over. We can try and push Republicans to do it, but we're not going to campaign on it. And I think as we go, Democrats get elected, day one, Trump, if he's still in office, tweets something out. Yeah, we're going to push impeachment. Absolutely. And I maybe we should promise the American people, make a pledge that if we are elected, we will impeach him at this point. Because if Republicans aren't going to do their jobs, we should pledge to do ours if elected and taken over. We'll investigate everything. We'll educate ourselves on Russia and actually uncover what happened and tell you how to prevent it from happening again. So hopefully, I think we're going to be okay. It's just going to be interesting to see how this lunatic goes from here. I think Kavanaugh might get through.
Yeah, I fear that he does as well. But again, we got to stay focused, got to stay organized, got to stay outraged. Scott, I appreciate the thoughts, the time. Always great talking to you, man.
Thank you, brother. Keep resisting, everybody.
Good stuff, Scott Dworkin. You can check out his podcast at The Dworkin Report. Good stuff there. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people from the talk.
We chase the best house from the basement. Our current ride race. We run to stand still. This is the fading American dream. I've got no time now. Keep going climb now. Before a second shot. Come on and go for it. I'm just searching for my dignity. This is the fading American dream. This is the fading American dream. This is the fading American dream.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. Chances are you may never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, inspecting an elevator, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So lots going on, lots of the big hearings, the book, the anonymous op-ed, so much. I wonder how Donald slept last night, knowing that there are people in his administration working diligently to thwart his agenda. And you got to wonder, is Pence right there at the front of the forethought? Bucking for that promotion? Don't know. I got lots to ask about. That's why I've asked our good friend Bob Ney to come talk with us, talk media news. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Sure, Rick.
So, did you see the big op-ed?
Oh, yes. I read it multiple times.
I did too. Are you? My initial reaction, I guess, who? If you had to guess, who's the author?
Well, I've got a. Well, originally, I guessed that it was somebody in the administration that absolutely loves free trade. Now, that's what I guessed.
Yep.
Somebody that's very, very into free trade. Now, not for 1 second do I believe, I would bet everything I own, it is not Mike Pence. They used a word that he uses a lot. So, number one, if it was Mike Pence, he wouldn't use the word.
Right.
I served with Mike Pence. He's, kind of a collected guy politically. So, therefore, I think he'd sit back and wait. Now, could have been somebody, higher up with Pence, because they said the White House, which could include, the vice president's office. So I don't believe it's Don McGahn who left. I absolutely do not. And I don't believe it's the Chief of Staff Kelly. Now, I want to ask you something, because what are you're passionate about several things, right? And you're passionate about unions, all right?
Right.
Now, let me pose this. If you were in the union and something in the complete top hierarchy of the international, or I'm in the White House, here's what I'm going to get to. And I believe so passionately I've got to change this administration. I got to save America, blah, blah, blah. And you're in the union and you believe you don't make these changes internally, the union's going to go completely down the tubes. Now, knowing your passion in the union, and then let's say I'm in the White House passionate, would either one of us then all of a sudden just do an op-ed that potentially could reveal us and we can't do our passionate task at hand?
No, absolutely not. And look, I said from the beginning it's propaganda, and it was meant to give the Kavanaugh hearing some cover, which it did. It sucked all the oxygen out of the room completely.
Okay, then you and I are the only two, and since 4:30 in the morning that agree on this. We're the only two. So that's where I'm at.
But I'm jaded. To be honest, the first person I thought that could have wrote it was Donald Trump. I mean, just to throw something out there to just to be able to say, look how absurd things are, and to be able to even attack his own administration. I mean, the guy's completely unhinged. So I put nothing past this guy.
So you see, they're fighting the deep state. The deep state's arrived within the Oval Office. And so, at first I was speculating this or that person. After rereading it, and I think it came, I don't know from whom, but it came with permission, with knowledge at the highest levels, maybe including the president. That's what I think. I mean, because if you're that passionate that you must, save this country, blah, 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 you wouldn't dare expose yourself till your task is done.
Nope.
That's my thought.
No, look, because eventually it all gets out.
Right, correct.
And eventually you're going to be found out. You're going to be fired. And as I said, if Trump got his way, if this is actually a resistance inside the White House, if Trump were to find out, and I'm sure they're waterboarding people as we speak, there could be the first public execution. I mean, that's how off the rails I think this guy really is.
Well, I just think that this is not. It's just too strange. And then, of course, the New York Times bid on it and took the bait.
Of course they did, and right at the perfect time. Look, I'm going. Why would you take this op-ed right in the middle of the Kavanaugh hearings? Why would you do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I know why they did it. They'll do anything to, be in the front limelight. It's money. Let's face it. That's what it's about with them. So, but I think something's wrong. I don't think that I think it's with knowledge. If the person is, quote, caught and then fired, they're probably going to end up on their feet somewhere really, in a good position.
Oh no, they're going to be the national hero on a certain side of the equation. Obviously, they'll be the goat on the other side. But the books, the movies, just don't walk near any open windows. So there is that. Now, did you see Trump's response to that?
Oh yeah.
The minute and a half little whatever the hell video that was with all of the cops in the background, which I'll tell you scared me to no end, because you've got this guy saying, CNN, New York Times, all of them, they're going to be gone by the time I'm done. And you had law enforcement, you had the long arm of the law behind him applauding and cheering, and that creeps me out.
Well, it's very bizarre couple of days, very bizarre.
Well,
and
it's only going to get worse.
So I think I'm not normally a conspiracy theorist, but I've seen enough things happen in my time that this could happen. And I just think that anybody as passionate as supposedly the person was in the op-ed would have kept very quiet to, quote, save the administration, save the White House, and save the country. He would have kept, or she would have kept very, very quiet. They wouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
Something's wrong.
Now, is this a major turning point in this administration? I mean, because look, there's been a lot of chaos. I mean, there's been a lot of chaos every week, but this week in particular, I mean, it's been really, the Woodward book, the op-ed, you had the Kavanaugh hearings, you've got, there's just this fire hose of chaos. Does this turn the administration in a different direction, do you think?
I mean, who knows? If they planned this themselves, they might have a revival plan. For example, this comes out, and then the president starts to change his ways, and what does the media write? Oh, he's softened a bit, or he's changed his way a bit. I mean, this could be completely branding and orchestrating.
Yeah,
completely. And the New York Times could have, fallen into this.
Now, the talk of the 25th Amendment the last 2 days, that's been it. And they're saying, oh, Pence has got to be on board, and just all smoke, you think?
Yes, I do, because in branding you recreate yourself sometimes, and so it goes from a chaos, a White House in chaos, and maybe they find the person who did it, maybe they want to release the name, maybe they don't. Things change in the White House, and there's little stories about the president just listening a little bit more, and all of a sudden he changes his own brand.
And
I just think, recently IHOP said they were changing their names to IHOP, International House of Burgers. Right?
Yeah, that was like a lead balloon.
Yeah, but it was a hoax, and then they put it out there that they made the best burgers and things, and somebody was didn't think properly, but was thinking down the road of where they wanted to be and the branding, and they changed, and then they went back to their pancakes, and this is just, I think, could be branding. I really do.
Yeah, I'm with you. Look, this is his, and you're not wrong for thinking of it, because this is what he does. I mean, this is, I believe this is his mastery.
Well, again, if you read it, the passion in that editorial, and that person will do anything, then they would have stayed low-key and done what they needed to do if they really believed what they said in that editorial. I think it's planned.
We will see. It'll be very interesting to see how this all plays out. Let's talk about Rudy for a moment. Evidently, Rudy's been doing some foreign work.
Well, this one, from what I looked into it, it's what a tangled web we all weave when we attempt to do things. And he was paid by Louis Freeh's firm, and Louis Freeh was, I think he was Clinton, right? Yeah, Clinton's FBI guy. And he's got a company, and he paid him. Well, I think that Rudy wrote a letter to a foreign entity, the president or something over there. But I think the fact that Freeh paid him probably will not bring any type of charge. Now, they do mention in the article the Mojahedin cult, MEK, which was an official terrorist group. Ironically, Rick, in my book, Sideswipe, in 2013, I talked about Rudy Giuliani and the MEK in my book 5 years ago. And they mentioned it in an article, not my book, but today, about him and the MEK. Well, the problem, too, is Howard Dean Dean was on the payroll too. Was paid by the MEK, the two of them.
No, I mean,
and
you look at all the money that just these these guys, just keep raking in from these foreign interests, and how constantly they're selling their souls to the highest bidder. It's infuriating.
Well, this was a foreign group at the time was on the terror list, and so Dean and Giuliani and Andy Card that used to work for George Bush, chief of staff, they were all hired to soft pedal this group, which eventually happened. So I read today, and I thought, okay, the Washington Post just singled out Giuliani on the MEK. If something happens to him, it has to happen to Dean. I think they're more vulnerable on the MEK, probably, but I think the fact that Louis Freeh firm paid Giuliani probably will then cause no problem. Probably.
Look, I mean, they're slippery as all can be.
The MEK. How did either one of them ever receive pay from a group that was on the official terror list at the time?
Must be nice to have friends in high places.
Really?
Let's move along. Evidently, we've signed a military communications agreement with India. Is that right?
Well, yes, and I travel to India twice a year. It's a democracy. They do like us quite a lot. They were huge fans of Obama. He made a lot of inroads to India, and we supported them over Pakistan, which is obviously not a democracy. But just as we signed this deal, the Iran sanctions that Trump is instituting, there's no way that India can cut off utilizing Iranian oil, and then there's contacts with Russia because India doesn't deal with Pakistan, and economically they've dealt with Russia. So I don't know how we do the deal with them without sanctioning them. So that makes a tense problem with the deal that Trump wants with India.
Wow. But again, you go back and you look at, and I think it was Mattis who said, Trump's got the intellect of about a 5th or 6th grader, which is probably generous. What you just laid out is of no concern to him whatsoever. It's about getting the deal. It's about being able to say, hey, I got a deal, and all the details be damned.
Well, right, because they announced this deal today, which in itself is strategically is okay for us, et cetera. They're buying some, hardware off of us. But the problem in India said, with 1.2 billion people over there, they cannot cut off the oil. And I don't know how we signed a deal that we really can't deal with them if they're dealing with Iran. But we signed a deal. So we're going to arrest people that have a company that existed after President Obama's deal. All these companies were formed. We're going to arrest them because it's now illegal, right. But we can go ahead and do a deal with a country that deals with Iran. So, figure that one out.
Wow. Just nuts. Just nuts. And finally, North Korea. Evidently, they've reaffirmed their commitment to a nuclear-free North Korea. Is that right?
Well, yes. I mean, I think, we have to verify that. I have always thought that this deal is not done with. When the national media was coming out a few weeks ago and Pompeo, Secretary of State, canceled the visit, everybody was saying it was done with. I don't think it's done with. I think it's still proceeding on between, especially North Korea and South Korea. But I found it very fascinating. South Korea said that Kim Jong-un said that he's never badmouthed Trump. So I'm reading that, and I'm like, okay, he felt very compelled to tell the president, hey, everybody, I think it's sort of like everybody's beating up on you, but I'm not saying anything.
I'm your guy.
I'm not saying a word.
When they throw you out, you can come live with me.
Yep.
Got a couch for you.
Maybe he wrote the op-ed.
That could be. Who knows? Crazy things, man. Just bizarre times. Bob, I appreciate the thoughts, man.
Yes,
good stuff.
Sir. Okay, thank you.
As always, our good friend Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Time to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. Chances are you may never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, inspecting an elevator, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org.
Sanity for a change. The Rick Smith Show.
Oh, yes, sanity. Yeah, there's a word that hasn't been thrown around a lot today. Hysterical story. A Bartlesville, Oklahoma man. A guy named Jesse Helms, 26-year-old, was so outraged that Nike, his beloved Nike, had paired with Colin Kaepernick that he went to the garage, got some kerosene, put the kerosene all over the shoes, videotaped it with his iPhone, lit it on fire, and guess what? His house burned down. His house burned down. Now he's been arrested for burning down his house. Please, conservatives, do more of that. Do more of that. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the burning down the house and everything else that we can get to in this crazy, insane week. Our good friend Sarah Burris, Raw Story reporter. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me.
So right in your backyard, right there in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Is that near you?
No, it's a little bit closer to Tulsa, and I'm in Oklahoma City. But there's a really great candle factory in Bartlesville, so maybe he was inspired by that. Who knows? Bless his heart.
Is that not hysterical?
You know, a lot of people do some crazy things in Oklahoma. My mom and I were just watching hillbilly thrill rides, sitting there thinking, we could do this in the backyard. Giant slingshots, you know, that you can slingshot a person using your four-wheeler. Okay. How hard could it be?
Okay, good luck with that. You know, my problem is I'm allergic to gravity. While it may be fun hurling through the air, it's like falling off a building. It's that sudden stop somewhere that I think would be a bad thing.
I think this is one of those things that could really inspire me to take that welding class.
All right. Well, hey, good on you. So what do you think? Op-ed? Who wrote it?
Oh, I have a conspiracy theory and I have a real theory.
All right, let's hear the conspiracy one first.
All right, so the conspiracy theory is the Lodestar reference that everybody keeps using, and then the paragraphs about John McCain. It kind of leads you to somebody who was probably more moderate Republican, more establishment. The word everybody thinks is coming from Mike Pence's office because it's something that he uses all the time in speeches and says frequently. I've heard other people say that the word is more typical of military men. And so I think that my conspiracy theory is that this is probably somebody who's like Pentagon level, maybe even Christopher Wray, somebody who's really, really smart, who's trying to make it look like somebody who's not them, perhaps. So that's my conspiracy theory.
So they've dumbed it down a little bit.
They've made it a little bit more establishment, and they've made reference to something that could make you think that it's Mike Pence. But my normal theory...
Let's hit that one.
It could be Mike Pence.
Bucking for the promotion, right?
Well, so Michael D'Antonio just published this book about Pence, this biography about Pence, where it said that he believes that God has anointed him to be a president.
Yep, that scares me.
So it makes you wonder, like, is this Mike Pence saying, you know, I did this for Jesus? You never know.
Well, as Carol told me, maybe it was Mother. Maybe Mother did it.
Maybe. But they indicated that it was a staffer. And they said they used the pronoun he. It could be a placeholder pronoun, who knows? But I mean, it could be somebody with a military background like John Kelly. It could be Mattis. A lot of people are saying, though, that it's probably a Pentagon person or somebody in national security, because it's somebody who knows what they're doing.
Any chances Donald Trump, just to stir stuff up?
That would be a whole different conspiracy theory. That's like Donald Trump being like, you know what, y'all, I'm done with this. This isn't fun anymore. I'm losing money on this. I'm just going to write this, because he's faked it with John Barron. He's faked, who was the other guy? He pretended to be another guy working for Donald Trump. So it could be Donald Trump pretending to be somebody else, pretending to be Mike Pence.
Yeah, DJT out.
Right? Could be Tiffany.
Well, it could be Barron.
Right?
I want my life back.
I want my soccer games back.
But it's been interesting watching, the different sides play about this, because, you've got, what was it, Ted Cruz, who said it was a Democrat who did it. It was the Democrats who were doing it. And I mean, you've got all these people all over the map, which is why it's so great that it's anonymous, because you got all these people guessing all over the place.
Exactly. This is super cool that it's anonymous. If it was somebody whose name was on it, if it was John Kelly, we'd be like, oh my God, John Kelly, he'd lose his job. That would be the end of it. Because it's anonymous, this story just keeps going and keeps going. It becomes this Washington, D.C. speculation game, during the recess, when finally people are starting to come back to D.C. and somebody needs something to talk about, and they're sick of talking about Brett Kavanaugh.
But there's my problem right there. The timing of this, I don't care what anybody says, the timing of this still very curious to me, because look, it did yesterday suck all of the oxygen out of the air around the Kavanaugh hearing.
It did. And what's interesting, we found out today, is that the op-ed was submitted several days ago, way before the Bob Woodward excerpts were leaked to the media and books were sent out. So what's strange is that Woodward's book seems to verify a lot of the same claims that we're seeing in the op-ed. And the op-ed was written first. So you wonder, is there any way that we could match this to some of the people that spoke to Woodward?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of this, it's going to be interesting to see what the White House does. Because as soon as I saw the op-ed, I tweeted out, good luck sleeping tonight, sweet prince, because the walls are watching you. The paranoia level has just got to be going to Nixonian levels at this point, because I hear there's talk of they're going to lie detector test everybody in the administration.
I love that idea. I think that is brilliant. I had a couple of other ideas that could fold in with that. If we showed on pay-per-view all of the lie detector tests for the White House staff, we could totally pay down the national debt with that.
See, you're stealing that from me.
The other idea too is that I think, and I tweeted this out, I think that we should go a step further than lie detector tests for the White House, and I think every single Republican should be tested, put in the lie detector to see which ones really do support Donald Trump and which ones are lying.
Ah, there's a twist.
That would be fun.
You get them there under the pretense that they're going to be talking about the op-ed, and a loyalty test.
Yeah.
Because I've said, if Trump finds the guy, he's going to want a public firing squad.
Oh yeah, totally. I'm surprised that he hasn't thrown somebody from the New York Times in jail yet. I think he's trying to figure out how he can do it. Don McGahn is still there, so I'm sure he's trying to talk him down. I'm sure Mike Pence is trying to talk him down. He wanted to put Omarosa in jail for the book that she wrote and the fact that she recorded him. Imagine what he wants to do to this person. And everybody said, Politico wrote a story today saying he is in meltdown mode. I think the Washington Post called it a volcanic reaction. He is losing his ever-loving mind. And Chris Cuomo put a poll on his Twitter account last night that said, was this a good idea or a bad idea, and why? And I was like, this is a brilliant idea, because we get to watch a meltdown from the president all weekend. This is going to be great. Better than cable.
So make sure you can check out his Twitter account while he still has one. Because look, I'm of the mindset, if you're throwing Alex Jones off of Twitter, this guy's got to go off Twitter too.
Agree. Absolutely agree. Although I would say it took Jack Dorsey quite a while to decide. And it wasn't until Dorsey encountered Alex Jones himself and started doing battle with him himself. Whenever it was other victims that had to go up against Alex Jones, Jack Dorsey didn't care. And now all of a sudden, you know, it's him and he's in Congress. And now he's like, bye-bye, Alex Jones. So welcome to the club, Jack Dorsey. We've been waiting. We have shirts.
Yeah. Now, are you uncomfortable by the fact that someone can be banned for this when, you know, there are so many other people out there who are doing just as, I mean, Alex Jones is an extreme character in this, but, you know, who do they get to decide arbitrarily while letting all of the other right-wing vile crap that gets thrown out there while that gets to exist?
I think the difference here is that Alex Jones was creating conspiracy theories. I mean, this was Holocaust deniers, false flag stories. He was bullying people online. He was doxing people online. He was breaking all of the Twitter rules, everything in the terms of service. And if you break the terms of service, you got to go. That is the rule of social media. You abide by the rules of social media. Rule number 1, don't be an ass, right? So don't make stuff up, number 2. And that's Alex Jones's problem. And I think he and everybody else who does that kind of stuff, they got to go.
No, I'm with you. At some point, there's got to be some way of getting rid of the trolls and all of the haters and all of those folks. But I'm not sure how you go about that.
I know. I don't mind haters. It's fine if you disagree. It's fine if you're a hater. It's fine if you're just generally, you know, a cantankerous old man who wants to tweet about something, or a cheese ogre in the White House. But the second you start doxing people, the second you start bullying people and start creating conspiracy theories about mass shootings being false flags, no, bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. But again, you know, I was watching, did you see the video of Alex Jones and Marco Rubio?
Yes, that was fantastic. What's so crazy is that, you know, Marco Rubio is this total Republican, and he hasn't had, you know, this big problem with Alex Jones. And all of a sudden there's a Parkland shooting, and Alex Jones is making up false flag crap about Parkland. And so it's like Rubio all of a sudden discovered, hey, this guy maybe isn't such a good guy after all. Surprise.
But he didn't know who he was, had no idea who he was.
Which, I mean, where you been? Have you been living under a rock? How many mistresses do you have to have in Washington to not know who Alex
I wish that
Jones
were the
is?
case. You know, I'm actually pro mistress. I'm pro getting drunk, pro doing, because then you're not screwing everybody.
Right. You would think that it would be that way. I've heard a lot of stories about Marco Rubio, so he may be getting some on the side, and he's still a jerk.
Well, there is always that. But, you know, let's get to the Kavanaugh hearing. I know you've been following this closely. Any thoughts on the good dad, the guy next door? Any ideas?
I do not care about his children's braces. I don't care about the basketball games. I don't care about the baseball game that his dad took him to whenever he was 7. All I want to know is what he's going to do as a Supreme Court justice. That's it. And this idea of creating this PR campaign around him and creating this persona like he's this good guy and so you can't vote against him. No. If you're going to talk about how great your baseball game was, or, you know, coaching your kids basketball, but you're going to take all of my rights away, what the hell, dude?
No,
I mean, it's great. The Parkland dad, Guttenberg, whenever he basically tried to, you know, shake the guy's hand and was denied, you know, and what's crazy is, other than the fact that he's a jerk, but I mean, this is somebody who talks about his daughters, and yet he won't shake the hand of somebody whose daughter was killed. And he doesn't understand that the rulings that he's going to make will determine whether or not more daughters get killed.
Yeah, I think he fully understands. I don't think he cares. You know, one of the things I found interesting is watching some of the conversations. You know, I think it was it Ted Cruz that he was talking to about abortion and about contraception. And, you know, immediately my mind, because I've been saying for years that it's not just that the Republicans and the zealot part of the Republican Party wants to do away with Roe versus Wade. I've been saying they want to go back to Griswold. They want to completely undo all of that, and no one has the right to birth control, and it's illegal. They want to go back to that. And he had an interesting kind of statement on, you know, why he was against, you know, the Affordable Care Act, and, you know, obviously this employer from providing contraception to their employees. And it led me right to that point.
He basically thinks that contraception, that the birth control pill causes an abortion.
Yep.
Which is just factually inaccurate. That's not the way it works. Even the Plan B does not cause an abortion. Plan B is basically like a really big dose of birth control pills. It's just hormones. And if you're already knocked up, guess what? It's not going to make you unknocked up. So this is just, if someone is that stupid, and I mean, I don't know if he is or not, honestly. I can't imagine somebody getting that far in the judiciary and being that dumb. So it may be all completely intentional. But you're right. This is basically men wanting to punish women for having sex. That's all it is.
Which is bizarre, because who are men going to have sex with?
Right. I got no problems being like, no more sex for y'all.
But yeah, this is scary times, because, you know, I don't think I've seen enough coverage of, you know, how bad things could get. Because, you know, I've been saying, and I've been accused of being hyperbolic on this, but I've been saying, you know, if this guy gets on the court, the entire 20th century could go away. I mean, every advancement forward for workers, consumers, for the environment, you can go down the list. You know, civil rights, you know, privacy, all of that stuff goes bye-bye.
LGBTQ rights, civil rights, women's rights, not to mention money in politics. Oh my God. And separation of powers and all of these things that are kind of nerdy issues, but are really important. And the Republicans love it. This is their opportunity to change the law for 30 years, for almost a generation. And this is what happens. This is why elections matter. And this is why people need to vote and elect people who are going to put in judges who are not crazy, completely insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's just plain nuts. And I mean, you know, I look at this, and you know, what's scary to me is that the world that I see on the other side of this for my kids is not a good place.
No, it's really not. And immigration to Canada is a little bit harder than people realize. So
I'm told you have to have like $450,000 in assets before they'll grant you citizenship.
So Mexico it is, everybody. I hear Costa Rica is lovely. They have sloths there, which are very cute.
All right. Okay, sloths. Yeah. All right. That's what you're into.
They're a little furry and they're cute. They have those claws.
Better get to that before the EPA does away with the environment entirely.
Right. Exactly. They're going to end up underwater because it's a coastal country.
Oh. Wow. Georgia, crazy place. Is it true that some guy threatened to shoot up his own kid's school?
Yeah, a guy was arrested. This is apparently a domestic related issue. This is a guy who is in a custody battle with his wife over his kid, and he wanted to come and pick up his daughter from school, and they told him he couldn't, and so he threatened to shoot up the school. Which, I mean, I get it. Divorces are hard. Divorces are bad. We've seen what Alex Jones went through.
But now he's got plenty of time to spend with the kids.
Yeah. He basically negated his entire career, you know, being like, it's all a lie. None of that is true. But this guy is, this is a domestic issue. And I mean, this is another example of mass shooters typically have domestic problems. They typically are, they come from abusive backgrounds. They are abusers. There's a history of violence in families, either against children or their wives or animals. And this is just another example of somebody like that.
But dumb enough to say, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, and I don't know if he had a gun. The reports that I read didn't detail what kind of weapons he had. So I don't know if he had anything, and if what he had, if he did have anything, was legally obtained. But there are no laws against it, so he could have.
Wow. Yeah, it's just mind-blowing to me.
It's really scary. This is an elementary school.
Yeah, I mean, why would you go? Just nuts. But again, this is the time we live in, and this is the kind of week it's been. Because look, I actually had a fairly reasonable weekend that was fairly somewhat calm. We spent some time with the kids. We did a bunch of things. It was okay. And then Monday hit, and it has just been like full on crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so exhausted. I went to see my grandfather tonight. I was like, I'm so excited to sleep. He was like, yeah, I can tell.
I talked about this earlier. One of my great fears, because you're somebody who does this, and you're kind of burnt out. My great fear is that the majority of people just go, you know what? Just please, whatever. I don't care. Just make the pain stop.
Yeah, you need a lot of self-care to do this job. And really, I mean, the second that I am off work, I shut it down. Like I was saying, we were watching the redneck thrill rides tonight. Like I shut that stuff down, and I try and spend time with family and friends and go outside and see the sunshine and, have a drink and stuff that makes me recharge my batteries. If I don't do that at the end of the workday, and on the weekends, then I'm never going to make it through this.
And nothing says relaxation like hillbilly thrill rides.
For real. We could have a roller coaster in the backyard. This could be brilliant.
And here I thought hillbilly hand fishing was bad.
Right? Oh, that you can really scratch up your hand doing that. That is not easy work. You got to have like some serious muscle. I know people who've done it.
Have you ever done it?
I've never done it. My governor candidate, Jerry Askins, in Oklahoma, went to award the women and men for the catfish winners a couple of years ago. So there's pictures of her holding up the fish. That was pretty cool.
All right, good on them.
Yeah.
You don't even need a fishing rod or a string or do you need a license?
Yeah, you do need a license, and you probably need a really big pan to fry your catfish. But other than that, you're good.
There you go. Good stuff. As always, Sarah, I appreciate the time.
You bet. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You as well. Stay sane.
We'll try.
Thanks so much, Sarah Burris, reporter over at Raw Story. Check out her work. Fantastic stuff. Highly, highly suggested. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
This is why we fight, why we lie awake. This is why we fight.
Finally, radio for the rest of us. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that became known as Bloody Thursday. 7 striking workers were shot dead and another 30 wounded at the Chicola Mill in Honapath, South Carolina. The Great Textile Strike of 1934 had started on September 1st. The 22-day strike spanned the eastern United States from New England to Georgia and involved close to 500,000 workers. The main issue was the dreaded stretch-out, increased workloads at the same or even reduced pay rates. Striking textile workers implemented the flying picket squad tactic employed by Minneapolis Teamsters earlier that summer. Hundreds drove from mill to prevent scabbing. Mill executives across the Piedmont were stunned and terrified at the strike's effectiveness and the workers' militancy. Strikers at the Chicola Mill had formed solid picket lines at the gate when scabs and special deputies, armed by the mill owners, opened fire. All 7 were shot in the back as they tried to escape the hail of bullets. According to a New York Times article the following day, the killings marked, quote, the beginning of the second bloody phase of the strike as one town after another reported completion of preparations to resist the flying squads and the picketing activity of the strikers. Frank Beecham, the grandson of Chicola Mill owner and mayor of Honapath, Dan Beecham, has worked to unearth the history of the massacre and apologize for his grandfather's cruelty. He notes that, as in many southern mill towns, after the strike went down to defeat, those who struck were fired and blacklisted. Those who retained their jobs essentially took a vow of silence, never to discuss the strike or the massacre again. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
got to tell you, I'm really not happy with Susan Collins, and I got to throw this out there because look, I've been very clear. Collins said that she had a very long conversation with Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh believes in decided law. He's going to be an umpire. He's going to call balls. Oh, that bull. And she's supposed to be the woman who cares about reproductive rights. She's supposed to be the one who cares about Roe. So this email pops up that Senator Richard Blumenthal has in his hand, and is saying, "Look, at Republicans, if you got problems with Roe, you got problems with this guy, read this. Read this email that says that." And he's very honest. He said, "Look, it's only decided law now. There are 3 Supreme Court justices now who'd be happy to overturn it. It could happen down the road." Her response, and again, this is one of those things: is she naive? Is she stupid? Or just really in on the game and just playing us as fools? She said, I am told he was editing an op-ed or something for clarity, and was merely stating a fact, which is that 3 justices on the court were anti-Roe. If that's the case, and he was not expressing his view, then I'm not sure what the point of this is. He's saying what... It's there. It's right there. It's right there. It's right there, Susan. It's right there. Don't be a dupe. Don't be the dupe. I don't even know where to go with that. I mean, it's one of those moments where you go, what exactly? What the heck is going through her mind? Also, evidently, a Yale University psychiatrist, Dr. Bandy Lee, evidently she told Salon and the New York Daily News today that 2 White House officials flagged Trump's behavior in October as something that, quote, scared them. Trump was scaring them. He was unraveling, she said. Now, she's written the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. 27 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess a president. Now, look, every week since Trump took office, we've had Propane Jane here on the program saying just that. And she's a psychiatrist saying, look, he's a sociopath. Look, he's devolving. He's go down the list, narcissistic, probably a little dementia thrown in there. All kinds of, sociopathic kind of that she knows much better than I do. And now, you go, hello, have you been paying attention? How much worse is this going to get? How much worse does it get? I tell you, it's just bizarre stuff. Also, and look, we knew this. Evidently, Trump is not going to answer any questions on obstruction, on collusion, on any of that. Not gonna happen. Evidently, Rudy made his position known, and it's just one of those things where you go, duh. The only thing that was going to allow Trump to testify was his narcissism, and maybe the threat of an orange jumpsuit is something that I don't know, caught his attention a little bit. I'd still love to see it, and I love Sarah's idea. Get all the Republicans on tape, log them into those lie detector machines, and grill, baby, grill. Quick break, right back.
It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me. They call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Big polluters clearly have big expectations for you.
Brett Kavanaugh on the U.S. Supreme Court spells big trouble for environmental standards and climate action. Plus, extreme weather slams into Japan and the Gulf Coast, and Wisconsin.
All of that slamming and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
They want to have windmills all over the place, right? When the wind doesn't blow, what do? We got problems. If your house is staring at a windmill, not good. When you hear that noise going round and round and round and you're living with it and then you go crazy after a couple of years.
I had no idea the White House was next to a windmill. This is your 900th Green News Report.
Not good.
Okay, Desi Doyen, it's our 900th episode of the Green News Report. You better make it a good one. No pressure.
Okay, I'll do my best. First up, Senate Republicans are ramming through confirmation hearings this week for Judge Brett Kavanaugh, President Trump's U.S. Supreme Court nominee, in hopes of swinging the nation's highest court hard right and potentially crippling the government's ability to act on climate change for a generation. In 12 years as a federal appellate court judge, Kavanaugh compiled an extensive record of voting against federal regulations on climate change and air pollution in a number of high-profile cases.
Well, of course, that's one of the reasons why he was nominated.
Yet, despite his record, on his second day of hearings in the Senate on Wednesday, Kavanaugh claimed he's not against all regulations.
I'm a skeptic of unauthorized regulation, of illegal regulation, of regulation that's outside the bounds of what the laws passed by Congress have said. We don't rewrite those laws. The executive branch also shouldn't be rewriting those laws.
In other words, Kavanaugh doesn't believe the Environmental Protection Agency has the authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions that cause dangerous climate change.
Well, that would be news to the existing Supreme Court.
Exactly. He thinks that because back when Congress passed the Clean Air Act, it didn't explicitly tell the agency to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, it therefore cannot regulate greenhouse gas emissions.
But wasn't the Clean Air Act specifically written to include any dangerous emissions that the EPA may determine in the future?
Exactly. The law does have mechanisms to incorporate new emerging threats.
That was Congress's intention when they wrote the law.
Yes, but Kavanaugh believes the EPA cannot act on global warming now unless Congress acts.
Unless they act to specifically rewrite the law.
Exactly.
The one that already exists.
Exactly.
The one that he would like us all to ignore.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Kavanaugh's confirmation would cement a hard right 5-4 majority on the nation's highest court, and that could have very long-term consequences on the federal effort for climate action,
including overturning what the Supreme Court has already determined regarding climate action.
Kavanaugh's also indicated he'd obliterate another central tenet of environmental law, the so-called Chevron doctrine, or Chevron deference, in which federal judges are supposed to defer to federal agency experts and scientists when deciding industry challenges to new pollution regulations. Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island on Tuesday slammed the coalition of right-wing dark money groups that he says are spending tens of millions of dollars to support Kavanaugh's confirmation.
Lots of big Republican influencers are polluters who like to pollute for free. Big polluters clearly have big expectations for you on their deregulatory effort. To me, it's what corporate capture of the courts looks like.
Meanwhile, the impacts continue from global warming intensified extreme weather. Japan this summer has already seen deadly record flooding and deadly record heat waves. And on Tuesday, the strongest typhoon in 25 years, Typhoon Jebi, slammed into Japan's west coast, killing at least 9 people as of airtime, ripping buildings apart, and forcing the evacuation of more than 1 million people. Here in the U.S., Wisconsin's Republican Governor Scott Walker issued a statewide emergency last week after parts of Wisconsin received nearly 6 months of rain in just 2 weeks. In southern Wisconsin, the Kickapoo River hit historic flood levels 2 feet higher than the previous record set back in 2008, causing damage that local officials described as, quote, breathtaking. And more rain is on the way as Tropical Storm Gordon heads to the Midwest after making landfall and causing flooding at the Alabama-Mississippi border. And way out in the Atlantic Ocean, Hurricane Florence has become the first major hurricane of the 2018 season, quickly intensifying into a Category 4 on Wednesday, what one meteorologist called a monster with an unknown track. So buckle up.
So even though this is our 900th episode of the Green News Report, looks like this may take a few hundred more before we solve this problem.
I believe so.
If you'd like to support our work here, I hope you will stop by bradblog.com/donate. You are the only ones who help the Green News Report continue to connect the climate change dots, which is something I think you'd like to do, if only to hear Desi Doyen say kickapoo again. That's bradblog.com/donate. You can also find and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your 900th Green News Report.
Got my 45 on, so I can rock on.
Minimum wage. You know what it means when they pay you minimum wage? You know what they're trying to tell you is like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would.
Ah, yes, you're not worth anything. In fact, you still have, the Ron Paulites who say, no, there should be no minimum wage. If people are desperate enough and hungry enough to work for $1 an hour, then, well, that should be what they get. And look, you put Kavanaugh on the court, I argue we're back to the days of the Lochner era where that's the mentality. If you're hungry enough, your kids are starving, if you're desperate enough to work in horrible conditions for poverty wages, well, that's your choice. It's your freedom. Yeah. You may remember yesterday we talked with Congressman Ro Khanna about his piece of legislation. He and Bernie Sanders put forth the Stop BEZOS Act, Stop Bad Employers by Zeroing Out Subsidies. I still like the Stop BEZOS Act. But here to talk about the idea and share some thoughts, maybe from a different frame, I've asked our good friend Arthur Delaney to come talk with us. Arthur's a reporter over at the Huffington Post. They've got a piece out, what the Bernie Sanders Amazon welfare fight is really about. Arthur, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So what's it really about?
Well, it's like you said, it's really about low wages, and surprisingly low wages for employees of somebody like Jeff Bezos, who is really rich, like not just a billionaire, but a billionaire 150 times over. That's unusual. So it's surprising to hear that the average wage at Amazon is less than $30,000 a year. That's low. The median household income in the U.S. is $50,000, and this is a profitable company. Now they say, they quibble with the numbers and all, but there's just no questioning that that's not a lot of money for people who work for Jeff Bezos.
No, you're right. But how do you think he got to be the 150 or 160 or 170? I mean, he's a billionaire every 4 days. How do you think he got all that?
Well, a key ingredient there is labor. So, that's where I suspect you were going with that question. I'm actually not an expert on Amazon itself, other than
I argue, Arthur, how he got to be so rich is stealing from the workforce. He's not sharing it, so he's hoarding it. It's mine, all mine, kind of like a miser counting his pennies.
Yeah. So we wrote this piece about what's it really all about, because there's this legislation that Ro Khanna and Bernie Sanders introduced that's got this sort of complicated stuff about. There's a bunch of his workers who are so poor they qualify for food stamps and other programs.
Right.
And there's a tax that would take that money back. I think the most important thing that people should know about the legislation is that it's about sending a message about Amazon and just the CEO-worker imbalance that we have in the United States right now.
And not just Amazon, but you can throw Walmart in there, and they also threw, I think it was it American or United Airlines?
This bill would target any company that's big, that has 500 or more workers. So Walmart is number one, and then Amazon is up there as well.
But here's the thing. I mean, I talked to a couple of people about this. I think most people are in favor of this because I think they believe, like I believe, that if you work hard, you play by the rules, you should get ahead. That, I believe it. I believe in reward for work. I actually do believe in the meritocracy, the idea that if you get up every day, you punch the clock, you work your butt off, that at the end of it, you should be able to provide for your family and not have to beg. I think that's a very commonly held, across political lines, it's a commonly held view.
Absolutely. But the reason I think it's important to know that this is a messaging bill is so that people don't get their hopes up and think this is going to happen.
Oh, no, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, and most people probably know that. It's got a sort of funny name. It's very bombastic. It's attacking Jeff Bezos personally. He's really been throwing hammers at him in interviews. But it's there's a process for doing legislation, especially safety net stuff like food stamps that Congress is actually doing right now, and Bernie Sanders is way on the outside of that. So it's important to keep that in mind. Now, there's another thing about this legislation, though. I mean, it's actually caused a huge controversy among people who like Bernie Sanders, among liberal policy experts and economists who kind of hate the bill. And this is what we got into with a news story today that I talked to the senator for about, why they're so against the legislation and what he thinks of the criticism. And if you want to hear about it, that'd be...
No, I do, because immediately as I was interviewing Ro Khanna last night, an economist that I respect, tweeted to me saying, hey, while I agree with the big picture, I agree that we should be paying workers more and we shouldn't be subsidizing this and that. He said, this bill's terrible.
Yeah.
And here's somebody that I respect saying that. So, and look, I knew from the beginning when I read about it that it's not going to happen. It's not going to pass. The Republicans aren't going to pass a tax increase, especially when they're talking about another tax cut bill coming along. But to me, it was about message. So what did the senators say about the criticism from the left?
Well, let me explain the criticism a little bit. I mean, this all started. This is a longstanding Democratic talking point that Bernie Sanders did not invent himself. Democrats, since at least 2004, have looked at using state payroll data how many workers at a big company like Walmart might also be receiving food stamp benefits or Medicaid benefits in a given state. And then they've said, look at that. This company doesn't pay its workers enough to even keep them out of poverty.
Right.
The programs that are helping these workers stay alive are subsidizing this company's low wages. And so it's always been a popular, whenever a report of this nature comes out, it's popular, it gets a lot of
No, and I say it too. Look, I'm on that bandwagon as well, because it's always been my view that if those subsidies weren't there, those workers wouldn't take the job, or would be struggling and suffering to where maybe they start to unionize and they fight for better wages, hours, and conditions.
So this is the funny thing. Every time one of those stories has come out over the past 15 years, the policy experts on the left have sort of grimaced, because that is not how, when you look at how a program like food stamps and Medicaid works economically, that's not how they see it interacting with the labor market. They do not see it as something that helps employers in any way. This may be confusing, but when you think about how food stamps works, it's actually kind of simple. This is a program that you qualify for just if you're poor.
Right.
That's it.
You earn poverty wages, you're below the poverty line, you're qualified for, where if you were making better wages, if the minimum wage were considerably higher, you wouldn't qualify for it.
Right. So it's money that you get without working. There are work requirements in these programs, but most of the recipients aren't subjected to them because they're waived in most states, even today. But this program gives you money to help you survive so that you don't starve to death. It exists because people were starving to death in America in the 20th century, and now they're not. The program, it works. It's a good program.
No, it absolutely works. Look, as a kid, my mother and I, we were on and off ADC. It was Aid to Dependent Children back then. It saved our lives. I mean, I'll be the first one to say it was a program that was absolutely something necessary. It's something that I believe in. But I still see it that if an employer is paying poverty wages, that they need that food stamps, because my mother was working through various parts of my childhood to where that she's still qualified.
Yeah.
That's to me is still subsidizing the low wage, because the employer, the workers aren't demanding better wages.
Well, they got rid of ADC, so we don't have that to kick around anymore.
Right. We've got SNAP now.
Here's what they say about SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's food stamps. Almost 40 million people get it. Most responsive, biggest safety net program in this country. it gives you money that you don't get for your work. It's non-market income.
Right.
It helps you eat whether you're working or not. And that simple fact means that is not going to help employers, because that means anyone who's getting that program is just going to be that much less desperate for labor income from some bad, lame, low-paying job, because they know they'll have a little bit of money, you know, $125 a month.
Yeah,
say.
I'm glad you emphasize a little bit, because it's not a lot. Because as a kid, I still remember the cabinets being empty at the end of the month, to where even the cockroaches are going, "Hey, nothing for me."
Right. So yeah, so it takes the edge off. You're less likely to be literally starving if you know that you've got food stamp benefits that will at least help you buy food
Right.
for part of the month. So that what that does, in economist speak, is it increases a worker's reservation wage, which is the least amount of money that the least amount of money you would work for, basically. Like you'd be willing to work, but the wage you'd be willing to take is higher when you know you're not going to starve to death without it. So essentially, it pushes wages up. Now they've done studies that sort of look at whether it had this effect, but it was many decades ago. But that's the economic theory.
Okay, so they're making the same argument that they make for unemployment insurance.
Yeah.
That you have a little bit of security now, that you won't take a crummy job out of desperation, and the theory is that raises wages. I get that, but I still look at Amazon, I still look at Walmart, I still look at a lot of these. Look at the entire fast food industry. I'm still seeing these low-waged employers who, their workforce, they're benefiting from all of these programs, be it food assistance, be it housing assistance, be it heating assistance, school lunch programs. We could go down the list of all the things that people get access to by having poverty wages. And I got to tell you, I'm looking at McDonald's, I'm looking at these big companies, they're making huge profits. They should be, and this is where the fairness to me comes in. And I get your argument, but the fairness to me is these companies are wildly profitable.
Yeah. Well, so this is background. There's always been this tension about this talking point among people who agree that low wages are bad. Everyone between the Democrats and these policy experts think that people being poor, even though they're working, is even worse than people being poor when they're not working. And it boiled over with the Sanders proposal in that past Democrats have done these reports and then used them to say, increase the minimum wage. And that will just force these companies to pay more. What the Sanders proposal would do is claw back the amount of money that the workers received in benefits from the companies. And the big point that the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities and a lot of other people were making this week is that if you did that, you were going to say it actually became law. Companies would have a strong incentive to avoid hiring people who they think would be on this program, because they would want to avoid the tax. So that would mean they would watch out for people who have kids or people who might be sick. They would, the bill says it's illegal to do this, but they would, it's not such a stretch to imagine that should a company really be facing this kind of tax, they would look for some kind of correlative trait that would allow them to avoid hiring poor people.
Right. No, and I asked Roe about that last night. I said, okay, fine. What's just to say that they're not going to hire any poor people? And he said, he gave the line that you gave. In the law, it'd be prohibited and it's against the law. And I'm going, well, there's a lot of stuff that employers do that is illegal, that they continually do. Just look at any union organizing campaign across this country.
Yeah, and so I asked Senator Sanders about this today, and what he said was, well, if they're paying a decent wage, that immediately should make it impossible for them to have this concern, because anyone they hired and paid a decent wage would no longer be poor. But now we're going to get into the details of who are the current Amazon employees who are so poor that they still qualify for these programs even though they work for Amazon. The reports that this information comes from they don't give us a lot of detail about what are the work hours of these individuals, and they're probably people who either work part-time or only for part of the year, or both of those things, still in such a low-paying situation that they still qualify. And so folks like Dean Baker, who's an economist at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, is saying, some people are voluntary part-time workers. And this is true. There's involuntary part-time employment, which is bad. It's underemployment. But there's also voluntary, and you want to let those people work, provide the amount of hours of labor that they actually want to. And so having this tax on the company would disrupt that. And the Sanders people told me that they would not differentiate between full and part-time. So it gets into these distorting things that the policy people don't like it. And this is what really surprised me. There's bad blood about it. There's a policy director for Sanders said, well, the Center on Budget, they're funded by Walmart. So that's why they're saying. So it got ugly out there. And I was surprised to see this happen. I thought that people would look at it as a messaging bill and not
like I did.
Literally.
No, I mean, it's how I looked at it. I go, there's no chance in a cold day that this is going to actually even get to a vote, let alone get passed. But I like the idea that you're having the conversation about low wage work. And look, Amazon has bigger problems than even just the low wage. I mean, let's talk about the working conditions, which I know people who work for different fulfillment centers. The working conditions are you're constantly followed, you're constantly timed, you're constantly on the clock. I mean, the electronic eye is with you all the time for $12 to $14 an hour.
That's a great point, and that's actually something that through the Bernie Sanders has drummed up tons of publicity for this because it is such a direct attack on a company and an individual. There's been a lot of news stories about it, and he's leveraged that into getting people who work for Amazon to share their stories with him. He's also using the publicity to highlight known things that the company's done that are controversial, like the things that you just mentioned. I also have seen Bernie talking about people peeing in bottles instead of going to the bathroom because they know they'll lose pay or get docked for the time they spend, going from one end of the warehouse to the bathroom. So I do still think it is a powerful way of drawing attention to not only low wages but also bad working conditions, subcontracting where you're not even working for the company where you're actually working. And things of that nature, but it's caused a policy brawl in the think tank world that is pretty impressive. Yeah,
and it's interesting that the left would take that on, and because I know there are some, and because I've taken a beating over this over the years, where I've said, I don't necessarily like handout programs.
Right.
I don't like food stamp programs. I don't necessarily like them. I want jobs programs. Yeah. I want people to have jobs. And if the private sector cannot or will not create enough jobs, the public sector should create a job for every person who needs one, because I do believe in the dignity of work. I believe in in making your own way and all that stuff. And I also believe in not having something like handout programs that are going to tear us apart. One of the things that just always amazed me is, I have poor friends on both sides of the aisle, one attacking the other because, their kids get free lunch or because it's just bizarre to me. So if you were able to level the playing field, that everyone was somewhere near, above the poverty line, that we could afford a reasonable place to live. We could afford to put food on the table, clothes on the kids' back, all of that stuff. I think it'd be a much better solution.
Well, that is one of the main things that the think tank crowd is criticizing. They say that if you're going to shame a company for having people on food stamps, you're using shame as a tactic. You're going to get shame spilled on the food stamps themselves, and that's contrary. That is supposed to be contrary to everything Democrats and liberal policy people stand for. You should not be using shame with in an attack. Or in something that could be perceived as an attack on the social safety net. That's what Republicans do.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you on that entirely. And I wish they would spend more time pursuing, the things that we need. Maybe changing our ossificated labor laws. Maybe undoing, Taft-Hartley. Maybe some of the things that would actually make people's lives better. I think that would be, a good push, but I still like the idea that we're having this conversation about one of the biggest companies in this world, with a guy who is the wealthiest guy in the world, sitting on top of the mountain, while the people who have created the wealth that he's pocketing are struggling just to put food on their kids' table.
Yeah, and this is also happening parallel to the actual food stamp debate in Congress, where Republicans are trying to cut enrollment in the program. And they're doing it explicitly because employers in their districts say, we can't fill workers for available jobs, which is, what they're really saying is we are unable to attract employees at the wages we want to pay. You've got to cut food stamps so that there are more people who are hungry who will take the job. I mean, that's exactly what they say. It seems, though, like times are kind of changing. Politics is not going Republicans' way right now, and it looks like they're ready to compromise in the bill they've been pushing, even though they control both chambers in Congress. So you look for that to happen in the next couple weeks.
Lots of fun. So last thought on this. You're saying it's dead on arrival. It's not going to happen. Anything positive do you think comes out of this?
Oh, I'm like you, Rick. I think it's a great topic all around. I figure that most people are not incredibly interested in the think tank wars, the tank battle that's been happening. But it's good to know that that's what's going on. This is a controversial idea, but basically generating discussion about work and the dignity of work and the policies that we have to support workers is, I think it's valuable for readers, and also I like to write stories about it, so I'm cool with it.
Yeah, good stuff. And you want to check out Arthur's piece, What the Bernie Sanders Amazon Welfare Fight is Really About. We'll get a link out so you can take a look at that. I highly suggest it, and highly suggest you follow Arthur Delaney on Twitter. Follow his work. Arthur, it's always great talking with you. I appreciate the time. Appreciate the work that you guys do.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
As always, good stuff. Quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
When the kids are united, they can never be defined as yesterday. There's a brand new sheriff today.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith. Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery for this war is one you're bound to lose. Are you fascists about to lose?
I gotta tell you, I agree with Arthur that it's not going to pass, but it's a great conversation to have. The idea of just basic fairness. Just basic fairness, that you get up every day, you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead. And to me, that's one of those things that I grew up believing. And I think a lot of us did. I really do. I think it's one of those core tenet things that we used to all hold in common. And there are very few of those things left anymore. And, as I've said, I've taken heat over the years for saying, I'm not in favor of welfare programs. I'm not in favor of them. I think that work should be part of it. Now, of course, there are going to be some people who aren't going to be able to work that you need to figure out how to help. And I like Andrew Yang's idea of just a guaranteed minimum income. In fact, I'm not a huge fan of Uncle Milton Friedman, but I thought his negative tax was a great idea by giving every person in this country a basic bottom line standard of living, to where if you're somebody who wants to work 100 hours a week and wants to make $100,000 a year, killing yourself, that you could do that. If you were someone who maybe didn't have the skills of someone else, that you were able to exist, that we didn't have poverty and desperation in our communities. But to me, the idea of having these programs that only a few get just leads to division and just constant turmoil, which is what the Republicans have seized on. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What do you think? Does the Sanders bill stand a chance? Is it worth pursuing? Is this a conversation that we as a country should be pursuing? I'd love to hear it, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, you can download the podcast right there at the website. Or, hey, if you got a smartphone, get the app on your phone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Look forward to hearing from you soon.